Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. We also never say our names at the front. I just realized that. I'm Theo Black.
And I'm Sarah Black.
And we are kicking today off with a discussion on Star Trek. I think it's good to start with Star Trek.
Yep, I am ready. And
If
for
you,
those of you listening, I am gesturing at my collection, the Star Trek Encyclopedia, the technical manual, the Ultimate Guide, which is very, very thin, and the FAQ 2.0
I don't know
in
that
book form.
the Ultimate Guide is apparently the smallest of them, which doesn't really make sense if you're going to call it the Ultimate Guide, but
There's also I have some very old stickers. These are legit from the 90s. Let's see, what's the 1992.
when the show was still running.
Some of them have been used. I should probably use those.
You could. You should probably save one
Yeah,
of them for posterity, but use the rest.
the Ultimate Guide and the 50 Years, which are just magazines, basically.
So what we're saying here is that Sarah is a Trekkie.
Yeah,
Although
although I will say it's TNG is my heart.
I was going to say you're a TNG Trekkie because you haven't seen. So for the record, we're going to talk season 1, and there are going to be spoilers for whatever episodes we're talking about and the season. We're not talking about
Season
all
one
of Star Trek TNG, The Next Generation.
Yes.
And we're going to spoil whatever happens in the season. I think this is going to be the first of a 7-parter where we talk about all 7 seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But
because
I recently have finished Star Trek: The Next Generation. We started. If anybody wants to, they can go and find Ensign's Logcast somewhere in the bowels of the internet and of maybe Apple Podcast. I don't even know if anybody's listening to us as a podcast. I don't even know where I check that. I should figure that out. Anyways, but yeah, you can find us there. And we had started a podcast where we were watching all the episodes and talking about them, and then we never finished it. And so, it's taken me years because of that and other reasons. But I finally sat down and finished the last 3 seasons in a couple months.
And for the record, this is the only Star Trek series you have watched, because you have not seen any of the other series, or you may have seen an episode here or there of some of the other series. But
I've seen episodes here and there. I think I've seen the not pilot of the original series, the one they made, and then they decided to make a different pilot episode or something. The one that didn't air, but is on Netflix now for those who are curious. And I've seen an episode of I think The Rock was in an episode of one of the shows, Voyager maybe. I don't know.
The Rock?
Yes.
That sounds really wrong to me, but I could be
He's
wrong.
in an episode of Star Trek.
Okay.
You trust me. It was a thing. I think I've seen a piece of that episode. And then I've also watched a part of Destiny. Destiny? No. Is that it? Is that the name of the new one? No,
Discovery.
Discovery. A part of that. And I have seen none of the movies of the old movies, but I've seen the 3 movies that are part of the Kelvin universe or whatever.
Oh my God, he was in an episode of Voyager. So I have seen all of the original series.
Come at me.
But I haven't seen much of it lately. I have seen all of TNG on many episodes repeatedly. I have seen all of all of Deep Space Nine, though it's been quite a while. I've seen all of Voyager, though it's been quite a while. I did not see all of Enterprise. I gave up after a season or 2. And none of the new stuff, really. I've watched an episode or 2. I've seen all the movies.
As I understand it, you tried Discovery an episode and were like, nope. And then you you tried an episode of Picard and you were like, this hurts. And then you stopped.
Well, they've just taken everything in a direction that's not interesting to me anymore. So that's fine. That's what they want to do, but I'm not going to watch it. So.
Yeah.
Season 1.
So I made an informal list, which I should pull up so that I have it in front of me. But of episodes that I enjoy from season 1 and episodes I don't. And also I should pull up the list so I have it in front of me so I can reference it. But I had us watch a few episodes in preparation for this, which would be I guess the third time I rewatched them, because I watched the first season once with you, and then we did it again for the podcast. And those. So I've actually rewatched these more than any other Trek episode, which is silly because they're not the better. It's not the better seasons. But oh shoot, this thing is. Oh, you got to update yourself so that I get the actual list. But the episodes that I had us rewatch were The Battle, 11001001, Home Soil, The Arsenal of Freedom. And then I think I also watched We'll Always Have Paris, The Naked Now, and Where No One Has Gone Before.
I did not watch The Naked Now, but I watched We'll Always Have Paris and Where No One Has Gone Before.
Okay, and so looking at the season as a whole, like it is such a delight to go back and watch like a certain era of television, because like a show like this would not get a second season in this. I mean, that's not true. There are still some shows that have like a bad first season or a wonky first season and get a second season. And actually sci-fi might be where it happens, but in general that doesn't happen because there is just so much content. If it is not drawing eyes, it just disappears. Like if it doesn't have a lot of people watching it, it just goes the way of the ether and disappears into the nether sphere of other stuff. And so so that is to say that as much as I enjoy parts of the first season, it is ultimately not a great season of television.
No.
It's and the second season isn't either, but we'll do that later. The first season, like the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, is by no means a terrible episode of television, but it is not what I would call good. It's Grappler Zorn and the station and like people and like they're trying to join the Federation and we're meeting up with everybody. It is just so I think this is the season that Roddenberry had the most influence on, and I don't remember when he left from the show as being like an active participant as to being just sort of, namesake. And it feels like it probably belongs a couple decades earlier. Like the tone of some of the show just feels like it belongs maybe with the original series or something.
Well, and here's what I kind of want to say about the whole season in general, and it bleeds into the next couple of seasons, is without going into the history of it, because I'm pretty sure other people have covered this.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember from us reading about it as we were watching it, there were problems in the writer's room. And it feels the problem is the writing. The actors are doing their best. Some of the lines are terrible. I don't know how anyone would say some of those lines. And they're inconsistent, so they don't make sense. So then you're trying to act out a character that doesn't really have a lot of logic to it.
Yeah.
Like, what is our goal here? And just the ideas are not fleshed out. You see some ideas, like, I think what works for the season one, just to kind of cut to the point, is that there's some interesting ideas and there are some interesting character moments. But a lot of but they're interspersed in poorly written characters with the ideas not explored very deeply, and sometimes just flat out not making any sense.
Yeah.
And that's really the problem. And it feels like, in a case like this, I don't blame any individual writers. It feels like, I don't know how the writers' rooms worked in the 90s and stuff, how all that came together, but it feels like a top level issue where, and I know there were other issues going on, but the writers they don't just write a script in general. They're given an assignment and they have to write it. But if you're not getting clear directions, if you don't know who the characters are, if you don't know what the overall story, I mean, this is episodic television too, so you're not like, you don't have to get from A to B necessarily, so that someone else can then take B and get to C, and someone else takes C and get to D, and so on. Yeah. You're just writing a little episode, and if you don't know what the unifying theme of the show is, it just, so that's what I see a lot of in these earlier episodes.
I'd be curious. I kind of remember this, though I'm wondering if I'm mixing things up a little bit. I think season 1 and 2 in particular had a fair number of writers who were holdovers either from the original series or because Roddenberry knew them through other things. And I think by season 3, not that all of these people who were original writers on the original series have gone away, but like they've shifted over to newer writers who, I don't know if they were like new or just writing, but like I know that I think some of the original series, and like I also noticed even for the episodes I like, in movies, if you see 4 writers in the credits of like your movie, it is not going to be bad, but that is definitely an alarm flag for like me. If you see that in television, it's not as bad because of the way television is written. However, there are a lot more episodes I noticed that had multiple writers on them in the first season. I don't know. So I think you're right. There's something going on with top-down writing on this first season.
Yeah, because there's just like, Troy will stop Picard right outside of the even in the better, I think this is in We'll Always Have Parrot. She stops him right outside the turbo lift on the bridge of the Enterprise to talk about how he's not dealing with his feelings. And it's like, it just feels like inappropriate.
Yeah.
And like someone didn't think about this. And there's just, a lot of stuff like that. So I don't think we should harp into it, but I think that's the kind of the fundamental flaw.
Yeah. And there's also, none of these episodes have made it into my rewatch, and I don't remember them that well, but a chunk of the episodes in the first half, and even, I mean, there are these episodes throughout the series, but especially in this, there's like 3 or 4 episodes in a row that I'm going to call the God episodes, where like Bradbury or whoever was at the top, I think it was Bradbury as I recall from Wikipedia, but had a fascination with God. And I don't actually know Gene
Roddenberry.
Roddenberry. I keep saying Bradbury. I need Roddenberry. Their names are similar. It's both sci-fi guys. Roddenberry, I don't know if he had a thing about what his religious beliefs were, but
I'm pretty sure he was atheist. So it's, yeah.
So this, that even makes sense to me, because I'm like, this is like somebody who's questioning of religion, but not necessarily believing in religion. Like I would totally, this feels like Buñuel in some ways. And so like, there's this sort of questioning of the God being in these episodes, and none of them are particularly good.
Yeah.
I do like the last outpost, just for when the God character, the God being, shows up and he's kind of this funky guy. But like, otherwise they're just not very good.
Well, even in Home Soil, I'd kind of forgotten. So Home Soil is the one where they find inorganic life on a planet that's being terraformed, and you're only supposed to terraform completely dead planets because you're supposed to kind of allow life to take whatever evolution it's going to on its own.
Yeah.
So if the planet's totally dead, but it's hard to find a good planet. You can't just terraform any dead planet. Anyway.
Yeah.
But at the end, they're like looking at this crystal that is apparently alive. And the crystal's like, we don't want to talk to you until you're more evolved. And I was just like, I don't know. It's a crystal. It just tried to declare war on them. But meanwhile, it is a superior life form. I really question that.
Yeah, I mean,
and then Picard's like, yes, I understand, tiny glowing crystal thing. Like, you're right. We are. Like, I understand the need to be like humble in the face of the awe that is the universe and the galaxy. But it feels like, like a guy just walked into my house and said, you're not really as smart as me, so you're gonna have to wait until we talk and then like leave. Like, it just, I don't know you, crystal creature.
Yeah, I was wondering if we're supposed to take it as a character piece of the crystal creature, like if it's a part of their character. They're a little brazen and a little like,
it happens arrogant. Over and over in season 1. So
yeah, with the knowledge of what the rest of season 1 is, and also the knowledge of like what of how Picard reacts, like, yes, I understand that whole thing. It's like, yeah, I like that, ugly giant bags of mostly water, like one of the best lines in all of season 1.
That's what the crystal creatures call humans, because as far as they're concerned, we are ugly bags of mostly water.
Ugly bags of mostly water. And I like a lot of that aspect of the episode, and like the whole inorganic life, and like how that's confusing, and like how you have to interact with that. But it is still mired in season 1 issues where like, there's the weird like declaring war, and like it just, there's scenes where like people are talking to each other, and I'm like, why are we talking about this here? This feels a little funny. The writing here just isn't as crisp.
Well, they Home Soil again, they like send Riker to talk to one of the scientists, like, because he's sexy is like the implicate, and it's just like that's where the writing really is like, are you like, what are like, it's one thing to be like, Riker, you are charismatic and attractive and women like to talk to you, she go talk to her. I mean, even that sounds a little weird, but it's nothing to be like, hey, Riker, go talk to that chick. Like, it's just like, what are you thinking by having this scene be, she's in her nightgown and she's crying, and it's very like, why isn't Troy down there talking to her, honestly?
Yeah, Troy gets, I mean, of the main cast, well, let's not get into the whole show, but like in season 1, Troy is the character where I feel like the most, even more than Tasha Yar, like I feel like she gets kind of the least to do.
Yeah.
They don't really know.
The writers have these characters, they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, they don't know what to do with them. And like we get some good the things that are set up that are kind of work for me are, there's like Data and Geordi, I think, get a moment or two in the first season, which I like. Worf and Data get some moments in the first season. Like I know, I'm like trying to think of specific moments, but I know that I remember they have these fun little moments. Like there are a few good, like those three get a few good moments, and Picard and Riker, their chemistry starts. But like, I don't know, like, and I guess Picard and Crusher, like Troy, I don't feel like really gets a moment into the main cast until later seasons. And even the stuff I'm talking about doesn't really feel like that strong. Like the stuff I'm talking about doesn't feel that strong until like season 3. Like we get a few moments, but that's
where I feel like being an episodic show hurts them. There was a lot more episodic television then.
Yeah.
But, when you have a show where you're gonna have like Stranger Things, even though it's had repeated seasons, like your character is gonna start here and end there.
Yeah.
But with an episodic show like TNG, it's like Troy's going to start as Troy and end as Troy. There's no character arc for her necessarily.
Yeah.
They do stuff later in the seasons, but even then,
yeah,
it's not like this is the episode where they grow closer to being this person. This is the episode where this happens that makes them,
Yeah.
It's just going to be, so that I think is tricky too.
I
think I agree that Troy is the worst written of the characters in general, but they do kind of figure out what to do with her eventually.
Yeah, I actually like her much more in season 6 and 7, although I don't like those seasons as much as the middle seasons. Like I like what they do with her in those seasons. It's just that the show ended, so they didn't get to explore it past season 7. I think you and I both, we've talked about this miss episodical television. Like they're just, I mean, it's not that there's none of it. Like it's just, and I don't
it's
watch
almost always sitcoms.
Yeah, like I don't like sitcoms. I think for people who listen to us regularly know that I don't care for comedy that much. I don't hate it. I just don't like things that are their main thing is comedy. And a lot of sitcom is comedy and then like family drama. And like, it just doesn't work for me. So that means, and I watch a lot of sci-fi television, which is actually almost only what I watch these days. And as far as television goes, and there's just, like The Expanse is great, but it's not episodical. Dark is really good. It's not episodical.
It's just episodic. It's not episodical, Theo. It's episodic.
Episodic, sorry. English is not good for me. Dark is episodic and is not, but is good, but it's episodic. And then like I want to watch The Mandalorian, but as far as I understand, that's not episodic either.
You mean Dark is not episodic?
Dark is not episodic.
Yeah.
None of these shows are episodic.
None of them. None of them are.
And so it's like, I just don't know where I'm supposed to go with that. Like, I want to watch the old, I mean, I need to get through some rewatches, but then we're going to watch the original series of Star Trek. And I'm, excited for that. And what that means is being going, again, episodic television. But yeah, you just don't get episodic television really the way you used to. And maybe someone just needs to tell me where it is, but
yeah.
My favorite episode of season 1 is actually The Battle, which I didn't do a ton of looking up, but is not an episode that I see anyone talking about.
No, and on rewatch, I didn't really care for it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I know you like it, and it's far from the worst of, season 1. But
yeah.
So talk about why you like The Battle.
Well, there's a lot of, so it's an adventure action episode to a degree, and Star Trek does those. I mean, people say that I think I've heard people talking about how there's like no action or something in Star Trek, and that's obviously not true. There's a few episodes here and there that are action oriented and all that. And The Battle has a little bit of action and sort of adventure-iness to it. But I like it because we learn something about Picard and we're also learning about the Ferengi, who are a new group to us. And it does a lot to establish who the Ferengi are and also who Picard is. And like, we know that he's somebody who matters because he's the captain of the Enterprise, and that obviously puts him, really high up in the ranks of, like, of Starfleet. I don't know, ranking. I don't know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, learning that he had this battle and he had to do this thing and he did this really neat thing, and like that's kind of what makes him special, is really interesting. And also establishing the Ferengi and their focus on commerce, and commerce as sort of their culture, is interesting and meaning. And like the fact that our Damon Bach is, going against things by not getting, by being seeking revenge and not profit, as is very foreign to their culture, is also interesting. They don't explore that a ton in the season. I mean, I feel like I don't know the Ferengi that well, and I've been told that in Deep Space Nine they get more of a treatment.
Yes.
And so and eventually I'll make it to Deep Space Nine to watch. But in this show they don't do a lot with the Ferengi, and it does tend to be oriented towards finance. And I kind of like how they set that up, and it feels more or less organic, even though the writing is a little shoddy. And it's like you can't get away from the demons of your past. Like, this thing that separates Picard and makes him special is also not something he's particularly fond of. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he had to destroy a ship, and he wasn't, he didn't like that, and he had to abandon his ship because it was badly damaged.
Mm-hmm.
So he destroyed the enemy vessel and, lost his. But I like I guess, I don't know if the headspace that puts Picard in, and how the crew is sort of, coming to know who Picard is through this. So to me, it's actually one of the best episodes in the first season for actually building out who the crew is, like that little bit. Like, the other stuff like we will probably talk about will always have Paris, but like that episode is an episode where it built some of this kind of stuff. But like the battle to me is an episode that does that. And so the revenge also makes sense across cultures. So like, you understand that the Ferengi are like humans because he's seeking revenge. Damon Bach is seeking revenge for his son who died,
Mm-hmm.
even though his son seems to have been in the wrong in terms of, having a shot first. And like how they play with changing Picard's memory with that weird weapon thingy that he uses, that orb, the orange orb. And so I like, they're similar, but they're different. Picard is special, but it's not something that he's happy about. Like there's some friction there, and that's interesting to me.
Well, and I think my main problem with it is the revenge story. I don't find people seeking revenge particularly interesting unless it's more like a Count of Monte Cristo situation, or there's like, I like the mechanics and getting into what they're going to do. But when it's just like a guy wanting to hurt another guy, like, and Star Trek is a little too full, especially with the recent Abrams stuff of like captains wanting revenge. And
Yeah,
I just,
it doesn't in current states. If you look at the Kelvin universe and how that's what all three movies are, it's definitely
right. So I don't want to, let me then take us into actually 11001001, because that's the thing I noticed about the battle and 11001001 is what I was talking about. You have these interesting ideas, like, the battle has some of the ingredients I like in a Star Trek episode: an abandoned ship, a piece of someone's past, people grappling with it. But I just didn't really like the execution very much.
Mhm.
The same goes for 11001001. You have Riker being distracted in the holodeck by this holodeck character.
Mhm.
But while they're called the Binars, are supposedly repairing the ship, but actually commandeering it for their own purposes. And I kind of like that overall. It's interesting that they're kind of like mostly benign.
Yeah.
Like, once you get down to it, they just, because they operate on such a yes or no level, they just didn't want to risk a no from people to get the help they needed.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, an alien way of thinking. But the holodeck stuff is, again, so clunkily done to where like, it's just shy of Picard telling Riker to have sex with the holodeck. It's so ill-defined. It's so, they could have done, they didn't need to change much for that to not be so cringy, but they didn't do it. And on top of that, all of this stuff, the Stargazer from the battle, and the holodeck, and the kind of way people can get caught up in it, is explored much better later. It's like they came up with the idea. Season 1 has a lot of ideas in it that are done poorly that we're actually going to see done well later.
Yeah,
So,
well, and it's like the direction. A lot of the directing in season 1 is also a little odd, and I don't know the direct. Like, again, I think it's a little better in the battle than it is in other places, but then the writing's a little weird. But yeah, like the direction of the actors is often like they talk kind of slow, or they talk a little weird, and they're like staring too long at things, and they're it's like it's I don't know if it's because they were wanting to make them seem in the future and more brilliant or something, but like it just ends up feeling kind of awkward when you're watching people do that. So it's like, I don't know. It's a little weird.
Well, Jonathan Frakes, for example, was he was in a soap opera before, and he has kind of a soapy acting quality to him. He's very kind of, I don't even know what word, kind of like suave, but in kind of a soapy way. I don't know how else to put it. And it comes to be kind of charming, because he's kind of, he's the one you put on the posters, kind of, if
Yeah, he has a bravado even in his acting. Picard is very Shakespearean, because well, not Picard, but Patrick Stewart is very Shakespearean. Yes. And weirdly, I think in season 1 and 2, Jonathan Frakes hasn't settled into a good foible for that. But as things go on, him and Picard have a very good relationship, and I like that they're not opposites or anything, but they are. Patrick Stewart is Shakespearean, and Jonathan Frakes ends up being dramatic, but not Shakespearean exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't quite, in season 1, we haven't quite got there yet.
Well, and it's a lot of like people saying Riker is charming, Riker's sleeping with everyone, and it doesn't. I think about like Schitt's Creek. I really like Schitt's Creek, and the Daniel Levy, I always pronounce Levy, has talked about earning certain moments. Like, you have to take your characters through things to earn certain moments. And while Star Trek is episodic, but Schitt's Creek is too, because it has season arcs, but it's very episodic in nature. Even if you're not going to have a season arc, you still have to earn stuff. Still have to. We have to understand certain things about a character before things happen, and they didn't really earn a lot of things in the beginning. And again, it goes back to the writing.
And in fact, in season 1, I forget which episode it is, but there's this episode where Riker is like looking at these little women hologram. There's like a hologram in his room, and it's these women who are like playing instruments or something, maybe.
Right.
And he's just like smiling at them, and they hold the shot for too long, and he's just smiling at them in a creepy way.
Yeah.
And it is just not. It's like,
that's
the think, Riker in season 1, and it's just not bueno.
And you think about Jonathan Frakes as an actor, like, this is what he's been told to do. You know what I mean? It's not, I don't know how much another actor could have done with that anyway. But of course, I like Riker. I actually quite like Jonathan Frakes. So I'm not like being down on him. I'm just saying, because Patrick Stewart is an excellent actor, but he's given such wonky lines in some of these early ones where he's giving it his like Shakespearean, best, but it doesn't make any sense what he's saying. So
we aren't at the 4 lights yet. We haven't reached that stage where he's really getting to be Shakespearean, and it works because we know who Picard is and how he behaves. So, anyways.
We should keep going. I don't know how long you want to talk about Star Trek.
So let's go through these next ones a little bit quicker. So the Arsenal of Freedom is one we rewatched. I just wanted to bring it up because it's one of the few ones. It's not a God episode, but it is an episode where we get to like really future tech, and I like how Star Trek is not a show that is just so in love with tech and it ignores the idea of bad tech,
right?
Which can happen in sci-fi shows. I was watching Dollhouse is a show that's really concerned with the tech that it's using, but then doesn't really fully evaluate it. So it's like definitely very questioning of it because of what it, like, I wouldn't say that about it, but it weirdly doesn't cover all the angles of it very well. Whereas like the Arsenal of Freedom is totally just like tech is kind of bad in this one instance and like covers that. And so I like how, and it's also, I like how it's, it's this marketing guy that they have to interact with and this whole planet. So I like how probative and questioning of tech that episode is.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I like it as well.
Yeah. And then we'll always have Paris as a nice Picard episode where we get to learn about Picard and we get some interesting data moments in that episode. It's another episode where I feel like we start to learn who the cast is a little bit. In Arsenal of Freedom, we get some of Crusher and Picard, but then we get a little bit more in We'll Always Have Paris because Picard's, a woman from Picard's past shows up. And so I like that aspect to it. There's a drama to that I enjoy.
Yes, I like that. I like that one because of the weird time stuff too. It doesn't make sense necessarily, but I don't need it to make sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that stuff makes sense. And they also they go to one coordinate and then another one, and it's like, why did we have that weird in between? I guess it's paranoia. I don't know. It just doesn't quite make sense. But I also like the way that episode resolves with Data and the 3 Datas. That's a neat set piece.
Well, where no one has come before, I want to bring up, and I know I just mentioned time, but let me try and. You had me watch the Essential Star Trek Next Generation video done by Dan Murrell. And he came up with a short list of like 57 episodes. And when I was Essential Star Trek, if you're only going to watch these 57. But the thing that I thought was interesting about his list is it was very Klingon and Romulan and Star Trek politic heavy.
Yeah.
And in a way, I completely get why he did it that way, because if you're going to watch the other seasons, the other shows, like this is like the lore. This is like the background, the politics. This is the intrigue. But what this gives you is a certain version of the Next Generation, which is very politically minded, very courtroom drama-y, very so on. And I personally, for the most part, I agreed with his choices, and in some cases, ones that he put on that I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not sure if you remove them from the list that you wouldn't lose something. Like some of the episodes I enjoy because I know the character backgrounds. And so then if you don't watch those episodes and don't have those backgrounds, you might lose something from your understanding.
Yeah.
But if I were going to build a 57 episode list of Star Trek, it would be more along the space is strange and empty and full of weird shit. And one of the ones I would definitely include, which he didn't include at all, is where no one has gone before, which has the Traveler.
Yeah, he didn't include any of the Traveler episodes.
No, he didn't include the Traveler. Some of his Q, I question, like he included, and again, it's because he wants, it's almost like the appendices of Lord of the Rings in a way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's not that I disagree with him. I think he made his list and it's fine. But again, my own list would be a little less heavy on that kind of stuff. Right. So I like the Traveler. The Traveler is a strange, just kind of this alien who kind of hitches a ride with humanity and has these interdimensional powers of some kind, and that kind of screws things up for the Enterprise, and they end up in a place where thought can be reality, which was a little too real right now, because I feel like we deal a lot with people who think that their thoughts are reality. But it's Star Trek, so instead it's very cool that people's thoughts become reality. So I was just thinking about like all the episodes he didn't include that I would include for the first season. It's only so much, but definitely the Traveler and his episodes. Actually, he included Remember Me, and the Traveler is the Traveler episode.
That's true. That's right. He did include that.
Which is much later. But so he would be part of this episode would be part of my own build of space is weird, aliens are aliens kind of Star Trek that I would create.
Yeah, I get that. I think this episode is interesting for those reasons, because it is, space is weird and large and kind of unknowable, and we're just sort of, it's, we think there's this huge ship, it's got all these fancy things on it, it looks so cool and whatever, and it's like you think you're really smart in going into things, and then you nudge a little cluster of neurons or electrons the wrong way, and suddenly like shit happens. and
it's much more. Sorry, keep going.
And it is that kind of like, you almost don't know enough to be afraid kind of thing. And I do like that about where no one has gone before.
Well, and to contrast it to the whole God, this is much more nuanced. This is like the Traveler does have abilities we don't have, and yet he sees a reason to hitch a ride. And that's the Star Trek I love, where you don't have people declaring themselves better. How can you, like, what metrics do you test that by? It's more this kind of curious meeting of like, what can you do? What can we do? What does this mean? Yeah. What do you think about how to do this? That's a way more interesting story than, we're just better than you.
Yeah, totally. And there's also two little moments that I like in this episode. One, because it's just completely weird, and one, because it's silly. One, so when the thoughts can become reality, Worf thinks of a Klingon Torg or something, or a
Tog, I think.
Tog, and it's a warthog or something. And he's like, it's my pet, my Klingon pet. And later you learn that he grew up with, Earth with human parents. So I'm like wondering, did they like import that pet or something? But whatever, it wasn't fully thought out. Who cares? But I like that, and I like that Tara's response to that is, "It's a kitty cat." It's just very silly. And then I like.
Did you just call her Tar again?
I called her Tar.
He means Tasha Yar.
Tasha Yar. I'm not the one who invented that, am I? I think you were Kirby.
Kirby did that, yeah.
Tasha Yar. And then the other part is that I like, but not like it's good, just I like, and how completely this is like emblematic of how the writing just wasn't quite there in season 1. Tasha Yar has a moment where thoughts become reality, and she's thinking of a cat, and she's suddenly in a cave, and she tells the cat to go away, and there's these men coming from the side, and she's like, I was just on the colony where I came up. It was a rape gang. And like I remember the first time I watched that, and I was like, what? This is Star Trek? This is what people love?
Yeah.
Tasha Yar and this rape gang thing? And I like how out of place and how bizarre it is, because it makes no sense in any of Star Trek. Like, just the way it was handled. Not in the fact that there would exist this kind of thing. That's not what doesn't make sense. It's how it was handled. Like, the writing just wasn't there yet in season 1.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Did you want to say anything about Naked Now, or?
Yeah, I have 2 more things. The Big Goodbye I didn't rewatch. I want to rewatch. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow or something. But it's a holodeck episode, and I enjoy it. It isn't great. Like, it's still of the episodes I enjoy from season 1. It's lower on the list. It doesn't quite work for me, and it kind of doesn't make sense. But I like that they're using the holodeck in an interesting way. Like, it's kind of a good holodeck episode, even if it isn't a good episode, maybe, or at least it's an okay episode. And then the Naked Now is fascinating to me because it's the second episode of season. This is another example of how the writing and they just didn't know what to do. It is the second episode of season 1, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
This is the second episode of season 1 because we're getting our characters drunk, and we don't know who they are yet, and we're getting them drunk and having them act off of each other in odd ways. And it's like, do this in season 3 or 4 or something. Don't do this in season 1, the second episode. Like, it makes no sense. And I like the episode because it's kind of loopy, but like, it makes no sense.
It's an episode that's fun if you've seen more of the show.
Yeah. Like, if you know where they're going to go, it's fun. Like, it might even be fun just because it's kind of a loopy episode, but like, it was even more fun rewatching it, knowing where they're going to end up as characters. And so it's so silly. Anyways, that's most of what, like,
I want to add that data lore is an important one from that season, and it introduces the crystalline entity as well, which I think is a very interesting character.
Yeah.
And then I think winner for worst of season 1 is Justice or Code of Honor, one of those.
Code of Honor, yeah. Code of Honor is so my
Code of Honor is offensive. And Justice is just bad.
So Justice is bad, but it's the naked people running around episode where they're just wearing little bits of cloth.
It's 60s sci-fi, like,
yeah,
hardcore.
and I don't. It's a bad episode, but it amuses me for those reasons. Like it's like we run everywhere, is what the people on the planet say, and then Riker and everyone's like, okay, I guess do as they do in Paris or whatever, and so they run with them.
Yeah.
And it's just like we're wearing such little clothing. It's very silly. But yeah, that episode's weird. Code of Honor is both my least favorite episode of the season and my least favorite episode of TNG. Like, it weirdly, we've talked about this, it doesn't have the worst writing, really. Like, if you were to put this episode in a vacuum and remove it from all context of society, like, it doesn't have, it's like, the writing is not the worst. Like, there's a clip episode in the next season that has worse writing, 'cause it's a clip episode. But, like, if you even want to count that. And there are probably other episodes that have really bad writing, but it is just so offensive that it's like, it is the worst episode.
Because it's using black actors, and it's, it's the way race, and it's all just a big mess anyway. But to have these kind of black actors doing black African stereotypes, and
also they've stolen a white woman.
It's no good.
It's no good. It's no good. I think I've read somewhere that most of the I don't know if most or all of the cast consider it to be the one that they're least, like, they're most uncomfortable with that they were in.
Yes.
Anyways, and then I'm trying to think, Too Short a Season is a weird episode, and it's just like so ham-fisted. I think Symbiosis is the one that's like a horror episode, but just doesn't work for me. Like, I've seen it written up as like, that's the one where there's like a plot and like they end up back at Starfleet Central or something.
No, you're thinking of Conspiracy. Symbiosis is the drug addiction episode.
Right. Conspiracy is the one that's like it's like a horror episode kind of, and it just makes no sense. And then Skin of Evil is probably the last one I have anything to say about, which is that it's probably essential if you're going to watch through the season, but it's not a great episode. Yeah. It's okay. It's not, it's got things in it. There's some interesting data stuff in that episode that I kind of like and that I think about. But anyways, that's probably enough of season 1. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do season 2 next week.
Yeah, I like talking about Star Trek. I could talk about Star Trek for quite some time.